I'd like to call the meeting to order of the Audit Committee for the City of New York. I'll be the acting chair since the chair is not here at the moment, and Mark Kaplan is on the phone. He will not be attending this meeting in person. So I'm going to ask that we postpone the nomination for the chair and the nomination for the secretary until the next meeting. And at this time, as well as the adoption of the bylaws. So at this time, I'd like to have the secretary take a roll call.
Bernie Rosen, who is not here at the moment. Mark Kaplan, who again is on the phone. Michael Spitzer.
Here.
Bud Larson.
Here.
Representing Controller Scott Stringer, Michelle Mark Levine.
Present.
Representing Public Advocate Letitia James, Larry Schimmel.
Present.
Representing Mayor Bill de Blasio, Nicole Fleming.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to have a motion to accept the draft minutes.
I'll make the motion.
I'll make a motion, but I wanted to suggest there are some interesting words in there that I'll send it on and you can fix them up.
Okay, thanks, Mark. At this time, Brooklyn Navy Yard Development Corp. is first on the agenda. Could you introduce yourselves and, if you'd like, make an opening remarks?
Thank you. Good morning. I'm John Madonia, the CFO of the Brooklyn Navy Yard Development Corporation. This is our controller, Wemo.
Could you get closer to the mic? I'm sorry.
And this is Tunde O'Donoghue, partner at Dean's Archer, our BNYDC's independent auditor. Fiscal 2016 was a successful year for BNYDC. We realized an excess of operating revenue over operating expense of in excess of $7 million before depreciation and amortization. Our current ratio is 2.7, and investment in property and equipment grew by $77.7 million. The yard had over 250 tenants employing almost 7,000 people. During FY16, BNYDC's Employment Center placed over 350 local residents in jobs paying an average salary of $16 an hour. In order to improve access for those employees and the additional thousands expected from our development projects, BNYDC instituted a shuttle service to the A, C, and F trains. The approximately $60 million increase in the property and equipment is attributable to the Green Manufacturing Center in Building 77. GMC is a 250,000 square foot industrial building that currently has leases for all 5 of its units. The overall cost was $63 million. Building 77 is an 18-story, 1 million square foot light industrial building. The overall cost is expected to be more than $195 million, including $88 million from city sources over 3 fiscal years. It will come online in May of 2017, and BNYDC has to date secured tenants for 60% of the building. In fiscal 2016, BNYDC received over $55 million in city capital funds, primarily for Building 77 and infrastructure improvements. We also received $5 million in federal and state sources, and our FEMA pipeline lists 24 projects with capital cost of in excess of $70 million. Private sector development continued to be strong in 2016. In addition to BP Root and Boston Properties, Dock 72, a 675,000 square foot building, office and creative space, and Admirals Road, which will house a 74,000 square foot Wegmans store with 87,000 square feet of additional retail, topped by 127,000 square feet of industrial space. Steiner Studios has begun construction on an expansion along Kent Avenue. The project will create 970,000 square feet of space, including 460,000 of new studios, new space in restored historic structures and new buildings for academic partners, media production companies, and ancillary businesses. It will also create 200,000 square feet of new sound stages to meet demands for space to shoot TV and commercials. Finally, the project will create New York City's first outdoor streetscape backlot. This 70,000 square foot backlot will not only fuel further growth of content creation in New York, but will also add a major tourism component while significantly easing disruption in the iconic neighborhoods which are heavily used for film and television shoots. Thank you.
Excuse me, could you introduce yourselves for the record again?
Oh, sure. I'm John Madonia, the CFO. This is Wemo Sanya, the controller, and Tundi you our
Okay.
accounting firm.
Does anybody have any questions at this time?
Yes, if you don't mind. I have a couple of comments and questions. The first one is on page 6 in your MD&A. Page 6 in your MD&A. I understand that this is a table summarizing revenue and expenses, and you're primarily looking at operations, but the change in net position is very dramatic, and it's a result of a capital grant that doesn't show up here at all. And I'm just thinking you may want to have added mention because it is a very large swing. So,
Thank you.
Also, a couple of times in the MDA on page 5 and others, you use the term excellent. You know, like corporation is in excellent condition. It just seems unusual.
Okay.
And then on page 7, it's performing excellently within its operating budget.
Okay, we'll make changes.
I have a question about your unearned revenue on page 20. I'm sorry, I'm jumping kind of quickly through.
Before we get,
Yes, of course. I'm sorry, Mark. Go ahead.
I'm Mike. He's Mark. Well, he's
Mike, I apologize.
Yeah, like to the recent accounting pronouncements, the first one you say beginning after June 15th, 2014, and then you go on to say the corporation is currently evaluating the impact of the standard. Yet the standard then would have had to been implemented in June 2015.
I'm sorry, where are we?
Page 13,
Yep.
the very first GASB announcement. And the third line from the bottom, it says, beginning after June 15, 2014, the statement should have been implemented, which would make it due the fiscal year ending 2015. And yet you say you're still evaluating it.
Long time.
Yeah, most of the new gas pronouncement we're going to implement this year.
Hey, can you get close to the mic? I'm sorry.
Yeah, most of the GASB pronouncement we're going to implement this year. We have been evaluating in the past few years, so mostly we're going to change the accounting representation, the finance statement as per the GASB standard.
But then this one's past due, and even in the next one, you don't say what the status is. And that would have been done for due 2016.
Can I respond to that, sir?
Yeah.
Okay. What happened was, at a certain point, the Navy Yard was leaning between being a non-for-profit and a governmental, para-governmental body. And this argument has been for a while. But at the last year, they were actually told that they have to follow the GASB standard because of the amount of control that the city exercises over it. And that's what brings the delay in the implementation of the
Basically, what I would like you to do is review all these, especially for the 2017.
Yes, we will do
Because
that.
there were several that there were inconsistent comments.
Yes.
If I could also interject and build on that comment, regardless of whether or not a final decision has been reached, if you're reporting in accordance with GASB standards, you should in fact implement all of the effective GASB standards by the time that GASB says that they should be implemented. It does not have anything to do with your determination of whether you're a nonprofit or a governmental entity. If you choose to report in accordance with GASB, you have to follow all of their effective standards.
And if I could one more time,
I'm surprised that, knowing that, especially pension, which is an important and possibly material dollar-wise implementation, I'm surprised to see that the audit opinion makes no reference to unimplemented GASB standards.
Mark, do you have any comment?
Well, I agree with everything that's been said so far. I tell you a couple of other little bits and pieces that I...
Is it, do you have any comments before page 20?
All right, yes, I do. Hold on. Sorry. I am useless with my right arm.
You're not ambidextrous?
I literally can't move it without pain.
As Mark's looking on page 17, in the compliance with SFAS 168, the very last sentence, therefore, is a not-for-profit. You're making, what is FASB ASC topic 958?
Same question.
FASB agency 958 is what the non-for-profit are supposed to follow.
Then say that. Because most readers don't know what that is.
Or you might delete the disclosure entirely. I don't know that it's required.
Okay.
Mark?
First of all, I agree with that comment. And as long as we're on page 17, it says the union plans for Local 3 and Local 30 are part of their negotiated fringe benefit and are accounted for therein. What does therein relate to?
I assume you heard him?
Yes.
Yeah.
The fringe benefit package is fine, but how you...
We don't control.
What are you trying to tell us?
The two union plans are controlled by the unions.
Let's put it this way. I think you should review that language to see what you're trying to get across to the reader. Maybe somebody else on the committee understood it. I sure didn't. Now, if we can go back a minute.
What page, Mark?
I'm not going to bother you with the little dinky stuff. But if you, way in which on page 5 you're dealing with non-GAAP accounting effects. That is what you're saying is that if you take out the non-cash items, the operation really was running fine. And here you get the excellent condition question. If we're going to make a point of saying that on a non-GAAP basis everything looks fine, the SEC, when it looks at this sort of thing, is very fussy about how you make those statements. That is in a SEC registrar. I think we've got paper outstanding. I think somebody will look at whether or not these disclosures are fulsome enough or appropriate enough in the light of the SEC staff's view about disclosing non-GAAP accounting measures. Current condition, I didn't have a chance to get into the literature, but I think somebody will look at that. Substantive comment. And then capital letters, I'm not going to bother you at. There is a I could do that from here.
Mark, what page you on?
I'm just flipping pages, Mike. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay. When you get over to page 9, operating revenues, including additional rent insurance premium. What is that?
BNYDC passes property insurance along to our tenants.
The lease requires them to maintain, to pay.
The lease requires them to pay a pro rata share of the Navy Yard's property insurance.
So this is insurance for, it's not rent insurance then, is it? It's liability insurance.
Correct, for the buildings.
you know, so many different kinds of insurance these days. When you say that, it's hard to be sure what insurance these people are picking up their share of.
Okay.
I doubt that it's rent insurance, but you never know.
No, not rent insurance.
And oh, the footnotes. Now, on page 11, last couple of lines, it says that the landlord holds a 55-year sublease of the building from, et cetera, and has tax ownership of the property. Well, to the lay reader, what is that supposed to mean? Do I own it or I don't?
Yeah, that's the only market.
In order to do the historic tax credits, there has to be a taxable entity, and
I think that maybe in the trade it's understood what you're saying, but I haven't seen this kind of concept in a footnote to a financial statement. If you're comfortable, I think you ought to think about that. I had the same set of comments about it. You're going to implement this stuff.
Mark, as you're looking, I'm going to go back to Michelle. She said she had something on page 20.
Thank you, Mike. On page 20, under your unearned revenue, it's interesting to me that one of these amounts is unchanged from last year. The WeWorks Boston property, is that something that you are going to be earning shortly?
as part of the acquisition, as part of the lease for Dock 72, which is the Boston properties, they purchased an option for an additional site, and we're not recognizing it until that time.
Thank you. I don't recall if that was in the footnotes or not, but if it's not, you might want to make sure it's explained somewhere.
Okay.
I noticed I had a comment here about the collateralizing the stuff with the banks. I think that's taken care of in a subsequent place in the footnote.
Actually, on page 18.
Page 16 is a reference to reclassification from prior years.
Yes.
Prior year statement. What are those?
Page 15, no?
They significant.
Which page is
I'm sorry.
On the bottom of page 16, reclassification, he's asking, is there anything material, or is it just the standard items that get reclassified?
Yeah, that's standard items, yeah. So,
Where I come from, I would like to see it said that it's not, none of these things had an impact on the financial statement.
On page 22, under the second paragraph, you said FEMA will reimburse Brooklyn Navy Yard for expenditures incurred in the rehabilitation program up to a maximum amount of $70 million. Well, how much have you spent? I mean, it should be in the footnote. Like, you're saying that a reader would be left with the impression you still yet to bill $70 million, even though in the next paragraph you say you got $1 million back.
I'm sorry, the $1 million we got back was,
Yeah, all I'm saying
this is the 70 is net of that.
yeah, but I'm saying you're
Okay.
able to get 70.
Right.
How much have you billed them? How much is still remaining to bill them? Or that you could bill them?
As I said, the 70 is the net.
Well, it says maximum.
That's the maximum under the PWs that have been issued.
Yeah, but
At
you
this
build up
time.
60 and you only have 10 left that you could bill them?
No, we haven't billed them. Over the past couple of years, we've billed them approximately $4 million, but I believe that was in FY15, not in FY16. The $70 million is the remaining capital expenditures that are budgeted for by FEMA.
I would suggest you reword it.
Okay.
Michelle, anymore?
Michelle, I'm sorry I'm late, bad transportation, but on page 19, your community development note received by it. What did you pledge?
Pardon me?
What did you pledge? It's not clear to me. You pledged community development funds?
No.
I'm reading it wrong, Don.
No, these are not.
Michelle, do you understand what they're doing here?
This is not CD funding. This is.
Pardon me?
This is not community development block grant funds.
It's not.
No, these are community development loans through tax credit instruments. No,
It has nothing to do with CB.
absolutely nothing
So
to
it's
do
a
with.
different kind of, it's just okay.
Okay.
Can I ask some more questions, Mike, or Bernie?
What's that?
I'm still the chair, but I'll turn it over to Bernie after the Brooklyn Navy.
No,
But go
okay.
ahead, Mark. What page you on?
I'm on page 18, the next set of questions. To have a very large amount of money, which is uninsured and deposited in banks,
Yeah.
why don't you get that
Yeah, no, I
collateralized?
figured, Mark, I figured you'd get to that. Go ahead. Very good.
Why do you have it? Why are you taking those risks?
Actually, this money is in the U.S. government securities, the backed by the U.S. government product. So basically, most of this 2016, that 21 million is backed by the government instruments. So it's most likely the most secured form of investment. We have FDIC insured 1.5 million. So most of the money we keep in the government funds.
That's one comment. I still don't.
Basically, you have 5.2 million or 3 million uninsured between the operating cash and the restricted.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically, based on our, the volume of the day-to-day cash flow, we need that kind of money because of the huge amount of the construction bills. Sometimes one construction bill is over like 4-5 million, so it's hard to keep the money in the very low amount, like below 250,000 FDIC amount, because of the access to the cash. So we keep that around 3-4 million in hand to meet the day-to-day, obligations.
We're just questioning the fact that it's uninsured and not protected in any way. Do you have that collateralized by your bank? Do you have it?
No, not yet. That's something we can look for there.
All right, then let me go on to one I don't understand at all. The last sentence in this page 18, it says that repayment is interest only payable on outstanding balances. First of all, repayment, which is interest, is not repayment, so the language is wrong. It's an interest only payable until November 15, and thereafter, payment of principal and interest. You don't know how much principal and interest is being paid. I understand the interest, but how you from this deduce what the principal payments are?
We can add. We can add that.
And that applies to that note
And the other
next
ones.
several notes.
I asked the same thing. What did he pledge on these loans? Go back to the page 18. What did he pledge?
Language should read interest is
I don't understand.
this is only payable. There's no principal payments until January 2022. Interest only until then, and thereafter payments up on a straight line basis. Or how do you decide how much you're going to pay in principal each period?
What's the page?
I think I've made my point. I don't want to hammer it too much. That one I suggest you edit.
Yeah, Mark, Bernie has a question again on the pledge.
These are substantial loans on page 18, 19. What did you pledge?
How'd you get the loan?
What?
How did they get the loan? What's the
Thank you.
These loans were made as part of the new market tax credit on instruments that we've done with Goldman for the Green Manufacturing Center and for Building
Could you
77.
speak into the mic? I'm sorry.
These loans are part of the new market tax credit instruments we've done with Goldman for Building 77 and for the Green Manufacturing Center.
Do you mind just stepping back and explaining this whole financing arrangement? I think we're a little confused about that.
Actually, these are the note receivables.
Speak into the mic, please.
Yeah, those are the note. Yeah, these are the notes receivable from the under that program, New Market Tax Credit. These are the BNYDC money funded. Those how it works like. When we go for the New Market Tax Credit program, we need to show the good faith commitment. So what we do we get the tax credit against the leverage loan.
Speak more slowly, please.
Sure. So during the period of initial 5 years compliance period, because of these federal tax dollars, we have to make sure that we keep a reserve against the tax credit we received in order to make sure that we compliance during that 5-year initial period. So what we do, we upfront keep the money. These are the notes receivable as a leverage loan that we upfront the money. So against this money, we get the tax credit dollar from the investors. These are the notes receivable to the BNYDC.
It's rather. The only reason I keep asking it is because the interest rate was so low, and they do defer the principal repayment for a few years. So, would you pledge a building? What asset did you pledge?
tax credits?
In this case, again, this is not borrowings. These are our money we put against the tax credit dollars. So basically, interest is low because of this program. Say, for example, we give upfront the 17 million, we get the 26 million back from the tax credit. So the difference is the investment money.
No. Okay.
Perhaps so that we can move on, if I could ask you to submit a written document that describes this financing arrangement.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes.
You can send that to our secretary.
And this is why tax accountants, tax lawyers make so much money.
Yes, I'm in the wrong profession.
There any other questions, Mark?
Hold on,
I was just quickly going to ask. You're pretty well fully rented, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Of available space.
Pardon me?
Of existing space, yes.
Yes. So you're trying to build more space, is that it?
Exactly. We took a building offline 4 years ago, 1 million square feet. We are in the process of reconstructing that building, turning in from 16 floors of basically dead space into 16 modern light industrial floors. All I can say is you wouldn't believe how this building looks right now.
You still have the cogeneration plant?
Yes, we do.
Can't get rid of it? All right.
there is one more thing that I have, and that is that on page 24, since this is collateral for the loan is no, was there a commitment fee? Have a loan commitment, and we haven't taken anything down. Normally, you pay something for that commitment.
You're referring to the development loans?
One that's referred to in 3 little I's on page 12, on page 24.
3II, there will be a commitment fee when these funds are made available to us. Actually, they refer to it as the dispersal fee.
I never,
Just out of curiosity, on page 23, you say the maturity date is September 17th. I know it's a couple days after the issuance, but did you extend the loan?
In December of 2016, we refinanced the loan. Doesn't he have that in our continuance?
Are there any more questions?
yeah, let's go to note 15. Says that you're involved in general liability insurance.
Note 15?
I'm sure that's the right word. You've got
25.
general liability claims, which are hopefully covered by insurance. The liability for any associated each of these matters is capped at half $50,000 per occurrence.
No.
How is it capped?
That's basically our deductible.
I can understand how insurance company says we'll not stick more than 50,000, but how do this organization caps the liability?
Correct. That we are liable for up to $50,000 of any claim.
So you don't have a cap on your insured amount?
We
Like,
have.
how much is the policy
The
for?
policy is.
The policy is now actually 10 million.
So if something is $10,001,
Yeah, so
then there is no, the cap is not the deductible. The cap is the deductible plus whatever is in excess of your policy limit.
Correct.
I would suggest you look at the wording here.
Yeah, I think this is not the way it's usually done. Also suggest that this thing could use a good editing because file changes in many different places. If you were here, I'd give it, maybe when I get back to my office, I'll just mail it to you.
That would be welcome.
You want to throw it across the table?
If I were there, Mike.
If there are no other questions.
I just have
Oh,
one
sorry.
quick, I don't want to delay. On your schedule of general administrative expenses, your supplemental information,
Page 28.
page 28. I noticed there was a big jump in consulting expenses to from about 185,000 to 600, almost 3,000. What is the nature of the consultings? What do your consultants do for you?
Some of this was consulting. The yard has been going through a period of great change, and as part of that, we have brought in several consultants that do reviews of different operating areas. For instance, last year, the finance department went through an organizational assessment. We've also brought in consultants to help with the refinancing of the $60 million loan. We've done a master planning exercise. These are largely all attributable to issues having to do with the growth of the yard.
I guess you're managed by whom? I mean, you have a board?
We have a board that's appointed by the mayor.
By the mayor, okay. So they approve some of these, okay.
They approve our budget, yes.
Okay,
You have an audit committee?
Yes, we do.
all right.
I didn't need the answer to your question, Mike.
They answered yes to the audit committee.
We have a management letter, I think, nothing really.
There's nothing in there.
Nothing.
I thank you for coming.
Thank you again, sir.
Thank
At this
you.
point, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Bernie Rosen.
He doesn't want us in, it's enough already. Okay, all right. I was gonna take it already. I figured the information.
what's next, Mr. Chairman?
He did good.
BRAC.
Okay.
BRAC that's out of business.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted, I think it should take 2 minutes. They're gone. What? Yeah, okay, I don't care. I remember the auditor from Bellow.
Apart from the fact that they have the tenses mixed up in the MD&A.
Absolutely.
Well, good morning.
Good morning. Could you introduce yourselves, please?
Yeah, my name is Ismail Mohammed. I'm the Executive Director of Budget for SPS. Also, I'm the Assistant Treasurer for BRAC.
My name is Lynn Roberts. I'm the Executive Director of Business Incentive Program and also the Executive Director of BRAC.
Name is Angelito Bailo. We did the audit.
I guess it was decided to take the assets.
Yes, we have filed for dissolution through the New York State Attorney General's office, and they gave us the go-ahead to dissolve BRAC, and the dissolution is almost complete. And so we started the process of transferring the funds from BRAC to another sister corporation that is managed by SPS. So we have transferred all the proceeds from BRAC to NIBAC.
The assets that you're transferring are essentially cash, right?
Right. Yes.
Right.
So there's very little activity.
I'm sorry, sir?
There was very little activity as you can see in the financial statement. We didn't have any expenses except for $255 of expenses that were incurred in FY16 in BRAC. And also we have generated about $210 in interest.
Who used to do your accounting at the Economic Development Corporation?
No.
No, you had your own staff?
Right.
Okay.
BRAC is
So
managed.
who's going to be doing it now?
It's going to be doing. The proceeds were transferred to New York Business Assistance Corporation.
And that's a city entity?
Yes.
And
Well, whoever's doing the work has created something I've never seen before.
what did I say?
Bottom of 12, it says net assets is classified as restricted expandable.
That was a typo. I'm sorry. I don't notice that.
Like an old-fashioned girdle.
Make that an E. That's expendable.
I assume it's expandable.
Yes.
Expendable.
But again,
It
not
was
to
called,
keep
but
you
it's used it.
I guess this has happened already.
Yes.
In the current fiscal year that we're in.
Yes. Yeah. It happened. Right now, we don't have any funding in BRAC.
Uh-huh. Who was he?
Just out of curiosity, who paid for the audit?
Yeah. Our deputy commissioner is here.
Good morning.
Morning.
Oh, the audit is paid through. Once the funding were transferred to NIBAC, the auditor was paid from NIBAC.
Thank you.
Somewhere in your statements, I guess you note that the major expenditures that could take place would be for the Williamsburg Greenpoint area.
Right.
That's
Yeah, it's still continuing. We already had some expenses in NIBAC. We have already paid out close to $100,000 out of the transfer amount of 400,000. So still we are continuing to pay out until the funds are exhausted.
If the funds are exhausted, then what happens?
They're gone.
That's it.
No, like,
You
next
wanna
point
ask?
up gets nothing. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, a decision was made just to leave it until the assets were exhausted.
Right.
That's correct.
You wanted to say something, sir?
No, that was correct, Mr. As you know, for several years, we were expending those funds. And so we could still
Let's move on.
attain
It's
the
not worth
purposes.
spending your time on it.
I don't mean to pry, but what will happen to the personnel from Brock? You will go over to the new entity?
And we don't have personnel in BRAC. There is no staff in BRAC because there is no activity, as you can see in BRAC. So everything that are being handled in NIBAC, the NIBAC staff will be handling it.
And it's through the agency staff.
I'm sorry, sir?
The agency, Small Business Services, is essentially managing those.
All right. No, over the years, Brock served an important purpose. There's no question about it. All right.
I guess we should thank you very much for this and past presentations and work on behalf of the city.
Yes, yeah, definitely we will miss
And I wish you well.
coming here.
We'll see you next year with a different entity.
That's right. Thank you,
Oh, no.
Deputy Controller.
What's that Latin expression? Requiescat in pacem? Rest in peace.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, and good luck,
Okay, thank
whatever
you.
happens.
Thanks.
The trust. That's not a joke. What? No, but, you know. Yeah, okay, so the Governor's Island Trust, okay.
Which one, Bernie?
The Governor's Island Trust.
I got it.
How you feeling, Mark? Okay. Sorry I asked.
The judge, the clerk, whenever anybody asked him that, he said, with my fingers as usual. So I've never asked.
Jackie, you look well. How are
But
you?
the answer is out.
You're dressed nice.
Nothing bad, it just hurts.
Very professional looking, honestly. These are new faces. Were you here last year or no?
No. I just started the job 6 months ago.
Okay.
My name is Irina Selka. I'm the
All right,
controller.
could you introduce yourselves for the record,
Sure.
please?
Good morning. My name is Michael Samueli. I'm the president and CEO of the Trust for Governor's Island.
Good morning. I'm Irina Selka. I'm the controller for the trust.
And our accountant.
Did you want to say something, or?
Yes, please. Good morning. Thank you for having us here today. As the newly installed president of the trust, I'm thrilled to be able to present to you our season for last year. We finished 2016 with our busiest season ever. We greeted over 585,000 New Yorkers to visit the island in our 4-month season. It was a 26% increase over the previous year. The island, as many of you know, and hopefully you've all been there, 172 acres in the middle of New York Harbor with about 1 million square feet of existing historic buildings and potentially 4 million square feet of additional development. We just completed in 2016 the third phase of park construction. There's been about $300 million invested by the city in the construction of a new park and infrastructure improvements on the island. As some of you may know, the island, when New York inherited it a few years ago, didn't even have potable water. So there's been a substantial amount of investment in infrastructure to improve the amount of amenities that New Yorkers get to receive. In July of last year, we opened the Hills, which was our third and most spectacular phase of the park construction. Hills rise over 70 feet above sea level, giving you 360-degree views of New York Harbor and the skyline. That week, we actually greeted 33,000 people. We ran free ferries all week, and we were also open from sunrise to sunset. Coming up in 2017, I'm very proud to talk about the fact that we've announced that we're opening May 1st for the first time ever. One of my goals in this position is to expand our season from 4 months to 365 as quickly as possible. And part of that is redevelopment. We are about to enter into a phase of redevelopment. We're trying to activate the island. As I said, we have about 1 million square feet of historic buildings, which could be activated. In July of last year, we also signed a lease with our first commercial rent-paying tenant, entity called QC Terme Day Spa. So they are currently in DOB right now and looking for permits to begin construction on about 80,000 square feet of a new destination spa, which will hopefully open in about 2 years. We invite a number of organizations to the island. We provide free space for free arts programming. Over 150,000 square feet is given to entities if they provide free programming space for arts organizations. Last year we hosted over 80 organizations and 500 different programs, largely around the visual and performing arts. This year, as I said, we're shifting to have more visual arts as part of our programming. And of course, we always have lots of music and performances on the island as well. We also announced recently that we have engaged for the first time Oyster Bar to come to the island, so we'll be actually increasing the amount of food and beverage options for New Yorkers. As some of you may know, if you've been to the island, we are very limited in terms of the infrastructure we have, so we actually import all of our food and beverage via food trucks. So we're trying to have more higher quality and diverse offerings for New Yorkers. So in closing, we are looking towards the next phase of development. In many ways, what you've experienced so far was Governor's Island 1.0, which was about activation and getting people to the park and building a new public open space to invite New Yorkers to come to the island, because in many ways the island was off people's radar for many, many years. I'm born and bred New Yorker, and I think for many of us who grew up in New York, Governor's Island did not exist, so one of my main goals is to actually bring it to every New Yorker. What's unique about Governor's Island is while we're technically part of Manhattan, we are really an island for everyone, and we've seen that in terms of the people that come to the island. We are about neck and neck between Brooklyn and New York and Manhattanites. We have about 40% people from Manhattan, 40% from Brooklyn, with the rest from the 5 boroughs. So me and my team are working very hard on what the next phase of redevelopment will be, which I saw your grilling of the Navy Yard folks. I hope to be at that level of questioning when it comes to revenues that we would hopefully be generating for the island to ultimately become self-sufficient. As you know, we get the bulk of our operating funding, about 90% of our operating funding from the city. The remainder comes from permitting fees that we get, and then 100% of our capital comes from the city as well, with some degree of private philanthropy, which has helped to subsidize some of the park construction.
Okay, thank you. You own some of the ferries?
Yeah, we own the...
I happen to see on the vessels the depreciation. I says, so in Manhattan, that ferry is near the Battery, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where you get.
We run our
and
predominant...
the one from Brooklyn, you have one from Brooklyn too? Or?
On weekends in the summer. So we work with New York Waterways as a subcontractor, so they run our Brooklyn service on weekends in summer, and then they also run supplementary service from Manhattan in summer when we run more often. But we own the primary ferry, which is the vehicular ferry, the Corson.
And the high school is on your land or the government's land?
It's on our land. So we have New York's Harbor School, so 480 students in a urban assembly school, which we're thrilled to have them there. The kids come to school every day. So we do actually run ferry service, basically 365 with the side open to the public. Yeah, you don't want to be on the 330 ferry.
No.
I try to avoid that. We are, I'm glad you brought up ferries, because we are in an RFP process to procure a new ferry. So we're buying a new ferry so that when this day spa opens, we'll have 20-minute service rather than the current hourly or half-hourly.
Yeah, I should have a busy summer then.
I'm hoping.
So that new ferry will be in addition to, not replacing?
Correct.
I noticed that you changed your service provider. Did you go through a bidding process there, and what happened to Turner?
Yeah, last year, before my arrival, there was a re-procurement of our construction management agreement. We have a CM agreement with previously with Turner, and today is with Lero. They basically hold our contracts for both operating and capital. I can't speak exactly to why that occurred, but it was a competitive process as I understand it.
And in terms of percentage of the land, the government still keeps a piece of it, right?
Yeah, so of the 172 acres, the trust controls 150 of them, and the National Park Service 22.
Clearly the majority.
Yeah, and as many of you, if you read the papers, you'll see that the National Park Service is having a decreasing presence, and so we work cooperatively with them. We mow their grass, we help maintain some of their buildings, so we have a very good relationship with the Park Service.
Do
We
you
had a
receive any?
conference once from another city agency, and there's some beautiful paintings in some of the buildings. Who owns them?
We do. So we have WPA era murals, which some of which are landmarked.
Yeah, they're landmarked, sure.
Do you receive any reimbursement from National Park Services for performing those services on their behalf?
Yeah.
One quickie. In your P&L, operating expenses, I don't see anything for maintenance. These depreciation, because you must spend a fair amount of money
What page did he say?
paying the place. Is that in the facilities management contract?
Yeah, that's the facilities management.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the facilities management contract.
The general facility management contract. Yeah, the operating expenses consist of general facility management contract, that's the personnel costs, utilities, and depreciation and amortization as well as other general administrative expenses, like legal fees, audit fees, insurance, other expenses.
So that includes maintenance.
That includes maintenance, yes.
The last comment I have, and this comes from a lawyer who practiced law in the public offering area, I've never seen a footnote or a financial statement saying something was extraordinary. What? So be it.
Mark, what page?
That's on footnote note 1, page 12. It refers to an extraordinary open space. Not a hyperbole, this is lawyers like, I guess, not so.
Actually, that's a very good point, because extraordinary actually has an accounting meaning and probably should not be used outside of that context.
Okay, fair enough. I think that was qualitative about the public open space, which is extraordinary, but we can take that out if you want me to. Have you been there?
I have to stick your neck out for that.
Just a minor comment. You refer to Sandy as Hurricane Sandy, and all the other financials that I've seen, it's Superstorm Sandy. So I don't know what it is.
I think it technically was not a hurricane when it did damage to New York, and that's why we've been going with Superstorm in the city's financial statements.
We can change that.
Yeah, just look at that.
But we did very well after that storm, by the way.
Yeah, no.
Ma'am?
Yes, Michelle, go ahead.
Thank you. I was curious about the Governor's Beach Club that's mentioned on page 6. Is that a membership organization? Or?
It's a term of art for what we've renamed the Manhattan Landing site. So it's about a 1-acre site that we let out short term. The Beach Club was a music venue for electronic music, which their lease expired at the end of last year, and that is going to be replaced by the Oyster Bar. So it'll be a little bit more diverse in terms of the people that will be able to use it.
Thank you. And then I have an accounting question on page 7. There's a discussion of the decrease in utilities being as a result of the water bill transferred to the city. I was surprised by that accounting treatment. If you are getting city resources to cover a cost, I would imagine that should be accounted for as grant revenue and as utility expense.
Well, since we are not paying any bills and the city is paying,
But they're your costs of operation, and they're being supported with non-cash assistance from the city.
So we should show it as a cost and then a reimbursement?
I believe that's the right treatment. I'll leave it for you to discuss with your auditors.
Okay.
It might not be disclosed that way, but it may be.
Okay.
And then I have a financial question on page 20. The accounting for the returned money. First, I'm not quite sure why it was taken in as if it were new money and a grant, and I'm not sure if it was a refund of capital or expense money. If it's a refund of capital money, then we are legally obligated to treat it a certain way. You are legally obligated to help us, the city, who gives you some of that money, right? That's some city money on capital. Is that correct?
So you're talking about Turner Construction giving us money back. So in the past, what we did, we are submitted payments in advance. So when reconciliation was done, there was some excess cash that they had, so they had to return it.
Is your capital funding including any New York City capital funding? That's what my impression was. When New York City issues debt in order to disperse capital funds to others and to be used by the city, we are under very strict legal requirements about the use of that money. And if any of that money comes back into the city or to you, and then ultimately to the city, presumably, it needs to be treated a special way in accordance with the law. So we need you to consult with the Office of Management and Budget and make sure that that was handled correctly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just in general, you alluded to the season begins May 1st?
Yep.
And when does it end?
Right, this year it'll be October 1st.
October 1st. And so in the winter months, for want of a better term, what happens?
We're closed to the general public, so my staff is there, the Harbor School students are there. We also have an artist residency program with the LMCC, Lower Manhattan Cultural Council, so there are about 20 artists in residence there. And we have the National Park Service has office space there. There's roughly, I would say, about 500 people on the island on average in the off-season.
In the off-season?
Yeah, and only during the week. There are very, very few people there on the weekends in the off-season.
And how many employees do you have?
We have about 25 on the trust staff.
Permanent staff?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, if I could just go back to that return. So if it's capital, we have those legal issues. If it's expense, I question the accounting of it as grant, as if it were new money, as opposed to a refund of expense money.
Sure.
Okay.
I have one mundane question. Your investments, they have bank acceptances, time deposits, worldwide assets, and ours. That's peanuts. What a candy store has that now.
Is it on the investment of funds?
Mark, what page?
Where is
What
that?
page, Mark?
19.
19?
I figured that's what.
That's a surprisingly small number. I bet you don't have any, but the idea that you would think of some bank with $50 million spread around the world was appropriate surprises me.
Mark, it's hard to hear you. Could you repeat that?
Mark, could you repeat the question, please?
If you will look at investments on page 19,
Right.
one of the
Under
places-
investments, Mark?
investments, and it says that you can have investments in bankers' acceptances and time deposits to banks with worldwide assets in excess of $50 million. It says that's nothing. Doesn't talk about equity, doesn't talk about whether it's profitable, and $50 million today as worldwide assets is infinitesimal. I don't know why, if I were a director, I would want money in such a small institution.
I think that's a good point. We could look at that.
Mark, they're going to look into that.
Okay.
And I was looking at note 5 on page 17, extensus, your retirement plans. They sponsor it and everything. In other words, they offer the retirement plan for your full-time employees, is that it?
That's right.
And they receive a fee for it, of course. And what determines the rate that the you pay for each employee? Service, salary, etc.?
Years of service.
No, the lady, I think, understands.
But he's right, the years of service.
Speak into them.
The years of service.
I would guess in today's world, somebody on the board of the organization, some governance body, looks at that periodically to be sure that the deal is a fair one from the employee's point of view.
We have a governance committee on our subcommittee on our board, and they're charged with looking at the matters, but I could bring it to their attention to look at and see how often we do it.
Jackie, who names this board members?
Yeah, because that's been a highly sensitive issue lately.
The mayor. All right. I have no more questions. What page?
No, there was a question as to who makes up your governing board?
Sure. We have a 13-member board, 8 of whom were appointed by the mayor, the remainder being other public officials.
And the other 5?
The other 5, governor, local council member, local assembly member, state senator, community board.
It's an unpaid board, I guess.
Correct.
Unwieldy large.
I love my board.
That was for the record.
You want to make sure that gets in the record.
Yeah.
If things get bad enough, you can always sell some of the paintings. They're beautiful. They really are, historic scenes. I'm kidding, but I have no more questions. Any more questions on the board? Thank you for a presentation.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Brooklyn Bridge Park. Yeah.
Ah, yes, we're going to sell the Brooklyn Bridge.
The next entity is your client too, ma'am?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And your name, please?
Hope Goldstein.
Okay. Oh. Okay, yeah. I don't get to Brooklyn too much. I don't know.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
I see you brought us some training aids.
Should I walk you through it?
Why don't you
Sure.
make them?
My name is David Lowen. I am the interim president of Brooklyn Bridge Park. You guys are used to seeing Regina Meyer. She left last fall, and I've been serving as interim in her place. I've been with the park for about 9 years, so most of Regina's tenure. To start off, obviously Brooklyn Bridge Park is an 85-acre park that is on the
How
Brooklyn.
many acres again?
85. Runs along about 1.3 miles along the Brooklyn waterfront from Atlantic Avenue to just north of the Manhattan Bridge. The park is about 80% complete, which you see in this slide here. Everything that is not pink is built and has been operating. And other things that are pink, the two on the left, which are the uplands for Pier 5 and Pier 3, are under construction. The one in the middle, which is the uplands of Pier 2, is funded and is going through its design right now. And then Brooklyn Bridge Plaza under the Brooklyn Bridge is the last phase that we'd like to get funded and built to complete the park. We had a handful of openings in 2016. The Brooklyn Children's Museum opened a satellite facility in the ground floor of 1 John Street in the park, several thousand square foot facility for children's daycare and activities and arts activities. On Pier 6, we opened the outboard 2/3 of the pier, adding about 3.5 acres of park. That happened last fall. Under the Manhattan Bridge, we opened a bouldering facility, the largest outdoor bouldering facility on the East Coast, which has been for rock climbing. Yeah. It's been a huge success, and I highly recommend going there. My daughter, it's a particular favorite of my daughter's. And then between Pier 5 and Pier 4, we opened the Brooklyn Bridge Park Marina, which is about 102 slip marina, which in addition to being a private marina also hosts a lot of programs that we have that are relating to the water and for boating. We have free kayaking, we have boat building activities, and we have activities that get disadvantaged youth out on the water and learning how to sail. And so that's been a major opening as well. Looking forward to next year, to 2017, the long-awaited reopening of the Squibb Park Bridge is a couple of weeks away. Last Friday, we submitted the final documentation to SBS. We're hoping that they will take a couple of weeks to review it and approve it, and we'll be able to open that in April. And that has been closed for a couple of years, so we're very excited about that. The Pier 5 Uplands, I noted before, is under construction and will open this summer, probably around midsummer. And Pier 3, I mentioned as well, is our last full pier under construction. That is scheduled to open in the summer of 2018. And that'll be another 3.5 acres of park. 5 acres of park. In terms of programming, we had a robust programming season this past year. We had Bridge Grooves, a music series. We had the World Science Festival. We have had basketball clinics in the Pier 2 basketball courts. Again, the bouldering. The National Park Service did their centennial in the park last summer, which brought together Bill Nye, the Science Guy, and Questlove, I think, for the first time in the same event. And then Brooklyn Boatworks, as I mentioned before, does all sorts of great activities with children in terms of getting them out on the water. In terms of arts and culture, the Public Art Fund hosted Understanding by Martin Creed at the outboard of Pier 6 last summer. This summer, they're going to be hosting a sculpture by Anish Kapoor on Pier 1 called Dissension. We had Swale by Marion Mattingly, which was a barge filled with, it's kind of a floating farm that docked at Pier 5. The United Photos Industries did Photoville, which was a recurring event here in the park and is going to be coming back next summer as well. And then at our 99 Plymouth Street facility, we have a rotating arts exhibition, most recently Birding by Hilary Lorenz, is an amazing paper cut installation. In terms of our development, we get money from the city and a little from the state to build out the park, but we get nothing from the city in terms of maintenance and operation funds. Those all come from a combination of our development sites as well as some money from our concessions and permitting activity. Majority of it from our development sites. We have 5 development sites that are approved in the park. 2 of them are completely open, which is 1 Brooklyn Bridge Park condominium, which has been open since about 2009, and 1 John Street, just north of the Manhattan Bridge, which is a 42-unit condominium building with, as I mentioned before, the Brooklyn Children's Museum on the ground floor and a retail space that will wind up being a restaurant that will hopefully open sometime this year. In addition to that, we have Empire Stores and Pier 1, which are partially open. Empire Stores is a 400,000 square foot office and retail facility. The anchor tenant is West Elm, both in terms of offices and retail. And there are a couple of other office tenants who have moved in. Over the course of this next year, we're expecting several more openings in terms of both office and retail tenants. Pier 1 is a mixed-use facility that includes a 200-room hotel. The flag there is One Hotel, which is a new flag by Starwood, and that opened about a month and a half ago and is operational. The restaurant and rooftop bar are still yet to open later this year, and it is also about a 100-unit condominium, which is at this point almost half occupied, and they're about 80% sold, and we are expecting it to fill in over the course of the rest of the year. The last remaining development site is Pier 6, We RFP'd that site and awarded it to a developer last year. They have been moving forward with their designs. We have been sued on that development site, and we are awaiting the resolution of that lawsuit. We were actually supposed to have our court date this morning, but it got delayed yesterday. So we are hopeful that that will get resolved accordingly, and we'll be able to move forward with that. That will include about 126 units of market rate condominiums, 100 units of affordable rental housing, and 40 units of market rate rental housing. The last page is just photos of those development sites that I just mentioned, and that's it.
Yeah, I'm just gonna, the one Brooklyn Bridge Park, the residential, let me step back. How long have you been in existence?
The Brooklyn Bridge Park Corporation has been in existence since 2010. Prior to 2010, the park was being run by a subsidiary of ESD called the Brooklyn Bridge Park Development Corporation.
So the Brooklyn Bridge Park building was completed after you took over?
The renovation of the One Brooklyn Bridge Park condominium started in about 2007 and finished in late 2008. So it was before the Brooklyn Bridge Park Corporation existed, but at the time...
completed building?
Yeah. Well, at the time, the park was being run by the subsidiary of ESD, and they own the land under it, and we administer it on their behalf. We have an administration agreement.
And 1 John Street?
1 John Street was vacant land that was owned by Con Ed. We acquired the property from them and then RFP'd out the site.
And when you say 2017, you're talking about the fiscal 17 or the calendar 17?
I'm talking about calendar 17.
Calendar year. Yeah, I figure that. How many employees do you have?
We have about...
A little over 50.
Yeah.
How many?
A little over 50.
A little over 50.
Which includes some seasonal staff as well.
I'm sorry?
Which includes some seasonal staff. Which includes seasonal staff, part-time seasonal staff.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I've got with me Jelani Watkins, our CFO, and Amanda DeMaio, who is our Director of Finance.
And your auditor.
And she was introduced last time, so I didn't.
On the bottom of page 3.
Of the financial statement.
Yeah.
Yes.
This whole string of numbers, which are hard to read. Can you put it, or a suggestion to put it into a schedule?
Essentially, it's the money that we received from the park that just sort of updates our sort of funding agreement.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying putting it into a schedule, because reading a string of numbers.
Okay, I mean, we can make that revision.
It may be
a table going forward. It's not a problem. And again, just to inform the committee, Brooklyn Bridge Park has a subcommittee of audit and finance members that review our books, also our investment policy as well.
Michelle has a question. What Michelle has a question? Michelle.
Thank you. On page 5 in your financial statements, the last sentence in the second to last paragraph recognized a little over $1 million in non-operating revenues from FEMA reimbursement. I am surprised to see that. Why were those revenues not accrued at the time that you incurred the expenses?
From my understanding, the revenues, the project worksheet that is associated with the expenses was not obligated until September of this year, which would then require us to sort of report it in this fiscal year.
Just so you know, I'm not saying that you need to do it this way, but the City of New York has reached the conclusion that in accordance with GASB 33, these revenues are actually fully recognizable in the period in which you have an eligible expenditure. You may or may not want to follow the city's lead on that, but it is, at least in my mind, a more rational accounting for these funds. We do, however, follow that rule when we prepare our federal funds.
All right, we'll certainly take that advisement. Thank you.
I also have a question on page 9.
Wait, just in the same paragraph, you're referring to it as Hurricane Sandy. And the city refers to it as Superstorm Sandy.
Okay. Right, we'll make note of it. Thanks.
you were going to ask him on the statement.
Yes.
Go ahead.
On page 9, under non-operating revenues and expenses, you have other contributions from government sources. Can you tell us what those are?
This would be the FEMA reimbursement.
That's the FEMA reimbursement. Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Back on.
And I was going to ask, why did the pilot payments and ground lease rent decline that much, sir?
Well, in 2015, we had upfront revenue.
You had
One-time lump sum payments, which we've had in previous fiscal years from our development sites. Roughly 17 million was from John Street, and ground rent, and then another 7 million was Pilot Mort.
So each of our development sites are structured so that there's a large upfront payment in their first year. It's kind of a down payment. And so we had down payments in other previous years. We didn't have one last year.
I also want you to think about that accounting, because normally when lease costs are front or back loaded, they are amortized over the life of the lease, I believe.
I mean, we've
Well,
raised
you all
this
wound
concern.
down. I
We've raised this concern. We've discussed this with our auditors.
Take a look
and
at page
this isn't the first
16.
time that we've done this,
Next to last line.
and they seem to advise that this is being
Somehow I don't
treated
think
for
that the
appropriately.
Tennessee Valley Authority
Thank you.
is related by S&P.
Mark, could you repeat that, please?
Page 16, next to last line.
page 15,
16.
16.
1-5, go ahead.
16.
16?
Just read it. It should be related, not related.
Oh, custodial credit risk.
That's minor oversight. We can certainly fix that
Got
going
it.
forward. Thank you for pointing that out to us.
Just to come back to the MD&A on page 6, the last paragraph, you're talking about non-current assets were 183 million, but I couldn't find the 31 million and the 215 anyplace. And if you go back to the footnote, the additions were 29.6 million. So just look at those numbers.
I'm sorry, I'm not following. Page 6. Yep.
The very last paragraph. The 183 is the capital assets, but I couldn't find like the 215 or the 31 any place in the financials or the footnotes. So just look at those numbers.
Okay.
Who does the OPEB calc?
Buck Consultants.
Buck?
What?
Buck Consultants.
I asked who does the OPEB calc, and they said Buck Consultants. It's an actuarial firm.
I know.
I guess that I'm looking at page 9 of the income statement. I guess the fact that you get the upfront payment tends to distort the comparison a bit.
Yeah.
Correct.
Once the Pier 6 development side is complete.
Pardon me?
Once the Pier 6 development side is complete, that distortion will go away, and it'll be much easier to do.
It'll be smoother.
Yeah.
In other words, what you're really saying is the pilot payments will pretty much be at the $8 or $10 million level.
Yeah, our expectation is actually closer to 10 to 12 on an annual basis,
Sorry.
and the non-pilot revenue will be in the around 7 or 8 million, and that'll, hopefully grow consistently.
I don't have any further questions.
Pardon me?
I don't have any further questions.
All right. I have no questions. Do you? No.
Mark, do you have any other questions?
I'm done. That's the little bits and pieces.
What page?
No. You said
No.
it's fine.
I suppose they get some other way.
Okay. Good job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, committee.
Thank you
you.
for coming. Thank you for your patience.
And thank you for your beautiful presentation.
What's next, folks?
Oh, sorry. Single audit.
I'm sorry, dear.
Single audit.
Come on.
Single audit?
The single audit, yeah. I got my copy this morning. It was delivered. I didn't have a chance to read it. Did we approve the minutes? Or-
Yes.
Yeah. At the beginning of the meeting before you arrived.
I have some. All right. Pardon me? I know, but it came this morning, sweetie. It's not you.
I didn't get the hard copy yet.
Thank you for
We
everything.
always, we always approve the minutes with the condition that non-material editorial changes can be made after the fact if submitted to the secretary. But if you have more substantial edits, we would need to reopen it.
Cosmo,
Pages
I
should not
guess
be
the
shuffled,
reason the
folks.
single audit is so big is you've actually put in, this is the way it would be submitted to the feds with the pieces from the regular audit.
Yes, that's correct, and it has the
Yeah.
financial statements in it, which make up a large portion of that rather thick document.
Yeah.
When it's submitted, it'll also contain the corrective action plan and the summary status of prior year
All right.
findings, which are separate documents present.
So you boiled it down to,
What we distributed a few minutes ago is sort of a summary,
Okay.
highlight reel of this very large set of documents. Hopefully you'll find this informative, but please do feel free to ask questions. If we may, like to, before we start, just kind of introduce the rest of the team. I don't know if some of them
no, please do.
will have a chance to speak, others will not. To my right is Marla Hummel, whom you know. Hassan Khan, he will have a role later in the presentation. Mike Ryan is new to the team, and Mike will be replacing John Morano, who's on the very end. John Morano was very instrumental and worked with me, George, and a number of others in the room on the 2016 single audit. John will continue to be with Grant Thornton, so he's not leaving our firm, but has elected to follow his or pursue a career in advisory services, and he is effectively transferring to our transaction advisory services group.
So the city's single audit made him change his mind on his career goals?
For the record, I don't believe that's the case. I did ask him about that, though.
But off the record?
Off the record, he's also said that wasn't the case. This has been an interest of John for some amount of years, and an opportunity has come up, and the timing was such that it made sense for him to pursue that, and we fully support and encourage him. Mike, I neglected to mention, Mike Ryan is a senior manager with Grant Thornton. He will be taking on John's responsibilities as they relate to the single audit. I'm sure and convinced that Mike will do a terrific job.
Okay, could you get a little closer to the mic?
Sure, how's that?
That's better.
Great. Mike will do a terrific job, but Mike's role will be also a little bit more expanded as we go into the fiscal 2017 audit. He will have a role on the city's financial statement audit as well, and the Department of Education in addition. So we've expanded the role a little bit. We think it'll work just fine, and we are very happy to have Mike as an addition to the team. At the very end is John. I kind of spoke about John's departure, but some of you already know John. Any questions on any of that? Okay, great. So if we move to page 4, just want to kind of, as I mentioned, give you a highlight reel of what happened in 2016. The 2016 single audit encompassed 13 agencies, all of which expended federal funds. We list the Department of Education, Health and Hospitals Corporation, and EDC. The Department of Education, as you all know, is part of the city, but for purposes of presenting its single audit, there isn't a separate exhibit, and that's the reason why we call them out. As you also know, HHC and EDC have independent auditors of their own, so they are not necessarily part, they are part of the single audit, but not necessarily with respect to their individual financial statements. With regard to the 2016 total federal expenditures were about 26 billion rather. A good amount of that, approximately 18 billion, relates to Medicare funding and pass-through funding from New York State. There are some thresholds in the next several bullets. Essentially, the Type A threshold, which is identified as a percentage of the total federal expenditures, was 39.4 billion in 2016, and the Type B was 9.8 billion. These are mathematical calculations based on the total amounts expended. They're very similar, different, but quite similar to 2015, as the level of funding increased slightly from 2015, but not to cause a very harsh or dramatic impact. There were
Cosmo,
20.
Could I stop you just
Absolutely.
a minute? I've had this discussion with the controllers people before. When it comes to Medicaid, for many years now, the state has built the city for its portion. Years ago, the city used to have to appropriate, or at least record, state funds, federal funds. There were delays in reimbursement. It was very difficult. And then in the mid-'80s, the state went to the MMIS system, and we'll bill you, and forget about appropriating the state and federal funds. I imagine that's pretty significant in the Department of Human Resources, where all the public assistance recipients get Medicaid. And I just think that the Medicaid program, even though there are expenditures in the city, should kind of be just a state program. When somebody is going to do the state single audit, they're going to pick up the city expenditures as well. It's a bone of contention, I know.
It has been ongoing discussion.
Ongoing discussions.
If I may.
And especially now, with what's going on with the healthcare bill.
I think that in the past, the judgment call was that because the city retains the obligation to determine eligibility, that we function as a subrecipient.
That determination.
We do. It seems like some of it is becoming automated. As recently as 2007, this came up and we discussed it directly with the Federal Department of Health and Human Services, and they confirmed that we should be including that money. But we are re-examining that.
So in other words, you have to estimate it, right? Since it's not appropriated.
No, we get that information from the state.
You get that from the state?
Yes.
And again, what is the total Medicaid cost in the city?
I don't recall at the moment. Do you mean budget expense?
Well,
I don't recall at the moment, but it's well into the billions.
it's a number you can't get.
Tens
It's
of
a number
billions.
you can't get.
No,
you can't get a statewide number.
Oh, a statewide number. No.
You can get it.
Well,
and it's very important, especially now. You hear 5 billion, you hear this, you hear that, and it's a tough number to get.
Right. So the amounts that are presented in the schedule of expenditures of federal awards are approximately a little bit more than 18 billion.
18 billion for Medicaid.
Correct.
That's the federal portion only.
This is the portion where we're thinking, or where we are in agreement with the judgment that the city maintains eligibility requirements, and so that's why it's presented
So
that
approximately 4.5 billion would be city funds.
I'm sorry, I can't comment on that.
no,
It makes sense, but I don't have the
I'm
numbers.
sorry about let's see. If the state share was equal to the federal share, would be 18 billion. And if the city shared and the state share would be 9 billion. It's a big number. And I'm telling you, with all the inference, I'm not so sure how accurate it is. With due respect to the hard work of the people, I'm on the board of HHC. I've heard quotes of what Medicaid has cost the state. I get all kinds of numbers. It's a tough number to get, and it's a very important number at this time. It always has been, but more so now. Go ahead, Scott.
Completely agree. So just moving on, there were 28 federal programs audited as major in 2016, 21 of which met this Type A threshold of 39.4 million or above, and 7 met the Type B threshold, which was 9.8 million and above. In addition, there are also requirements by the state of New York over its transportation programs, and so there were 4 major programs audited for the state of New York following state codification rules Port 43, which is the New York State version of their compliance over the funding that's received by the Transportation Department. Moving on to the next page. Just a quick note on risk assessment and how that all works. Under the uniform guidance for which 2016 was the first year that the city was required to follow these somewhat new standards, the inherent risk determination that's usually made by auditors using a number of judgments has been taken away. So what that means is, in layman's terms, what that means is that the federal agencies want greater attention paid to programs that may not be as large as they, from a volume of spending perspective, because in their view, most of these programs, or at least a large portion of these programs, have never been subject to audit. And if you take a step back, what I'm saying there is if you read between the lines, audited judgment typically goes to the largest programs, and by their nature, large programs tend to be, not always, but in general, tend to be more complex, and they have a number of other criteria associated with them that kind of gets them into that auditor screen of, gee, we have to audit these. So the uniform guidance has actually pulled that judgment call away with the intention of trying to get more coverage on programs that may have never been audited. And so we, in our 2016 risk assessment, did undergo that process. We did audit a number of smaller programs that have not been audited in the past. That will continue in future years. One of the other things I didn't want to bore you with some level of detail here is that when these new requirements were put in place, there was a provision that in the first 3 years of implementation, that it allowed the auditor to move some program funds, not the funds, but move the audit requirements of certain programs into other years. So by that, what's intended for that to accomplish is that all the programs will go on a 3-year cycle. And so in this first year of adopting this new guidance, we actually laid out a roadmap for the next 2 years and what that is going to look like, and then use the criteria to audit the 28 programs that I referred to earlier. I mentioned the last bullet on this page in terms of the Department of Transportation, and the threshold for those programs, by the way, is $3 million. So it's a much smaller threshold than the federal programs. And so those were audited. There were 4 of those that were audited. So if you move on to page 6, what we've done here is kind of created a 6-year sort of a trend to pictorially demonstrate what the level of expenditures looks like for the past 6 years, 2011 through 2016 inclusive. Of course, these numbers have been rounded, but you can see that when I refer to not such a large increase in overall federal funding, went from 24.8 to 26.2 roughly. And the other thing that you can see here is that other than 2012, there seemed to be an increasing trend in overall program expenditures. On slide 7, So this is kind of the composition by agency, if you will, that comprise that 26.2 billion that I've been referring to. The Health and Human Services being the largest component at just
That's where
over.
your Medicaid falls.
But that's exactly right. The 21.4 billion includes the 18.2 billion of Medicare funding.
How
So-
does your community development block grants mostly? The HUD,
There, yes,
mostly.
yes.
Homeland dropped $300 million going for this?
Again, these are depending on the project worksheets that are actually obligated. And so this kind of, can fluctuate year to year. As Michelle mentioned previously, the city has adopted, and we completely agree, the methodology of recognizing the expenditures for financial statement purposes when they're incurred. And so there is a reconciliation in the single audit that kind of takes those expenditures back to the financial statements or from financial statements to federal funding. Okay. So moving forward, again, slide 8 indicates the level of funding for New York State. Again, these are Department of Transportation funds, and you can see that there was a slight dip in 14 and 15, but 2016 levels were a little bit over $250 million. So that's kind of the way things panned out. Marla, do you want to?
Yeah.
So Marla will take us through the rest of this document.
On slide 9, Cosmo had mentioned the 28 major programs that had been audited this year. So pages 9 and 10 give you the specifics of which programs those were that were audited this year, as well as the dollars of expenditures that relate to each of those programs. The bottom of page 10, you can see that the major programs that were subject to audit accounted for approximately 23 billion out of the 26. So we had a coverage of about 89%. So pretty good coverage this year. Moving on to page 11, we move into the results of our work that was done for the single audit. Page 11 is a summary of the various reports that are issued, which includes not only the opinion on the financial statements, which you see in your very large packet there, but we also will be issuing our report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance and other matters in accordance with government auditing standards, as well as a report on compliance for each of the major programs and a report on compliance with respect to the state programs. For the programs that were audited in 2016, on page 12, we've outlined a high-level summary of the findings for the year. There were 9 total findings for 2016. Of those findings, 2 were determined to be material weaknesses in internal controls. 1, a significant deficiency in internal controls, 3, internal control deficiencies, and 3 were compliance findings that related to specific matters that did not necessarily result from weaknesses in internal controls. And of those 9, 5 were repeat findings from prior years. I will point out that of the repeat findings, out of the 5, 3 were the compliance-only findings, so not necessarily control matters, but the compliance issues. And the other 2 were compliance and internal control deficiencies. So the significant deficiency and the material weaknesses identified were new matters. Page 13 is a graphical presentation of the trends in terms of findings. So you can see in general over the last 5 years, the number of findings has been on the decline, which is a good trend. And I will tell you from a big picture perspective, for the number of dollars, the dollars that are running through the city and the number of programs, the number of agencies involved, 9 findings is not a bad place to be.
Not a bad heading.
Not at all. And also, I will also point out that of the 9 findings, none of those resulted in question costs. So we didn't identify any costs that had been spent that shouldn't have been. So another good place to be. On page 14, we outline for you the definition of a material weakness. I know you've all been through that before. The slides are here, so I'm not going to read that to you. I will point out the two material weaknesses. The first relates to the restatement of the financial statements related to the pension matters that we've previously discussed. So again, I'm not going to repeat information that you already have. The second relates to the adoption assistance program. And this is over the documentation and monitoring controls as it relates to eligibility. This, what I'll point out here is that this is a documentation and a control matter. We did not identify any participants in the program that were not eligible to have been part of the program. It's a control and documentation matter.
If I could interrupt you for a quick question. We've been told in the past that the eligibility and documentation issues with the adoption assistance program really relate to older cases, and that more recent cases, our documentation and record keeping have been dramatically improved. I'm curious if the errors that you found were older or newer cases.
John, do you have a recollection?
We'll look into that and get back to you.
Thank you.
Yep.
On page 15, we have outlined for you the one matter that was identified as a significant deficiency. This relates to the child nutrition cluster, and again, monitoring and documentation related to eligibility. Again, we did not identify any students that had received benefits that were not eligible, but there were some incorrect determinations, two to be exact, where students didn't receive enough benefit, by increasing the monitoring and the review that's performed, we can make sure that the kids get what they're eligible for. Page 16 outlines the three control deficiencies. Again, they relate to enhanced monitoring controls, 2 over subrecipients, and 1 with respect to reporting within the various programs. And the final 2 slides, pages 17 and 18, are a very high-level summary for you, so you can see the status of the prior year findings. So this is a listing of all of the findings that were reported in last year's audit. You can see from this detail that of the 17 findings that were reported last year, 12 have been corrected and are considered to be remediated. There were 5, as I mentioned before, that were repeated this year. So again, the downward trend.
So I would like to point your attention on slide 18 to the housing preservation and development area, where it talks about special tests on housing quality standards. That has been an ongoing finding for a long time. The issue there essentially is that HPD staff do not always or consistently have the ability to go into the residences that are affected by some of these issues. And so while we were able
You're
to...
talking about the Section 8 program, I think.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so while, so there are fixes, so to speak, that need to happen to these residences, and they are required to be inspected after the fixes are actually put into place. HPD staff cannot always gain access to those apartments, and so it by their inability to be able to gain access within a 90-day period, this comment continues to be presented to the committee and unfortunately included as part of the single audit, because there is a 90-day requirement. We understand and acknowledge the fact that there's not much more that the HPD staff can do. They cannot force themselves into the residence, but nevertheless, they are out of compliance in these kinds of situations, and that's the main reason why you see it repeating.
Just to be clear, you have actually seen documented attempts to gain entry, as opposed to simply seeing a lack of inspection reports.
Yes, there's documented evidence of attempts to gain access, and there's also evidence that eventually they did gain the access, it just wasn't in
In
the
the
90-day
90 days.
period.
Thank you very much.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments, thoughts?
Well,
I would.
federal budget director has his way, you won't have any community development block grants. It's devastating for the city.
That's looking at the silver lining.
Right.
We'll have a cheaper single audit.
No.
I said that's looking at at the silver lining. We may have a less expensive single audit. All right, not in your tenure. But.
Probably not in my tenure. The only other thing I did want to bring to the committee's attention is that we have thoroughly reviewed the management's corrective action plan as well as the status of the prior year findings, which are also documents that are not covered necessarily by the slide deck that we just went through, but they are separate documents that were made available to you as part of
Separate,
the
as a
hard
separate
copy.
handout.
Right, and so I'm happy to report that we are in agreement with management. I will say, to be completely transparent, there was a couple of instances where we had some spirited conversation, but nevertheless, I think at the end of the day, and quite frankly, I expect that. I think it's part of the process, and it's a healthy part of the process. But at the end of the day, we are comfortable that management's corrective action plan addresses the issues that we have identified. We do look forward to seeing this take hold in future years. Being mindful, however, because of the timing of how these audits actually happen, you may find some very similar findings in the 2017 audit, simply because the corrective action plans that are articulated did not have enough of a runway to be fully implemented. So, it's quite possible that you see some of this repeat at least another year. We feel that a 2-year window is probably an appropriate amount of time before it starts raising red flags. I did discuss with you my thoughts on that long-standing HPD issue. I think everybody's aware of it. No, unfortunately, the feds are not going to back off of nobody wants to back off of those requirements, and so we don't really foresee an issue to the city coming out of that particular finding. But I just wanted you to be aware that some of these things will take a longer runway to fully implement, and it's quite possible that you'll see repeat comments or very similar comments in at least in 2017.
If I could take this opportunity just to mention a specific,
What was that?
if I just want to mention a specific prior year finding and how it was resolved or how it is being resolved. For many years, Deloitte & Touche included as a material weakness a finding that we did not have a grants management system.
Yes.
We have worked diligently, to start improving that grants management. OMB can speak more to that. We are also working to use some of those same tools in the expense grants going forward. We also, I think more importantly, we're able to document that our existing procedures do in fact offer sufficient assurance and risk reduction with regard to whether or not we are keeping track of and identifying all of the federal funds.
No, let the record show that. I think that's a very good point.
I should say, I assume that you had the same sense of the ending. Is that fair? Or do you want to make a comment?
No, I think that's very fair. We've had a number of conversations, Michelle, Nicole, and others at OMB, and I think we are comfortable in the sense that we feel that the database system that has been implemented for capital grants and about to be implemented for expense grants in fiscal 2018 will provide greater insight and should address the concerns that were raised by Deloitte.
Thank you.
We ought to, Mark, do you have any questions?
On what they've just gone through? No.
Thank you, Mark.
I've listened to it before.
What'd he say?
I listened to it before. He heard it before.
He didn't hear that.
He's heard it before.
Oh. I think it's a very fine job. And thank you for the handout, it's well done. We have to take a motion on approving the single audit, just like the regular audit?
I believe we do.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, are we approving it, or are we going to go over the single audit report?
If you have questions about the body of the report, please bring them up.
I think you're going to get a big kick out of this one, since I find it. You reverse the order of the coding in one place. Not to find it, because I read the whole damn thing.
When I saw this on the
With
computer,
such a triumph.
I said, I'm not going to sit and print this. I'd burn up, I'd blow the print.
So go ahead and I'll see what, there were, as I said, one that was just obviously a typo.
Mark, I think you may be the only person who had specific questions, so we'll wait for you.
Oh my. When you read these reports, you think we're really in the business of paying pension money and OPEB money and nothing else.
Do your questions relate to the single audit or to the city's financial statements?
Take your choice.
The city financial statements were adopted and approved this of October.
Go ahead and do it. I'm sure that you folks will agree with the comment I make. The accountants will when I find it.
No, I don't. I don't. Mark, if your questions are not...
They're not material, Bernie, so go ahead.
They're not material? Okay. I think that's what you said. So I would...
I think it's a motion to accept the single audit, not approve it.
I'm sorry, George?
I think it's a motion to accept this single audit, not approve it.
Speak into the
I
mic.
think it's a motion to accept the single audit.
Yeah, that's what it is. Okay.
Yeah. Unlike the CAFR where we also approve issuance, I think here we're just accepting the auditor's report.
Yes. Second?
I'll second it, but we have to file it with the feds.
That's true. We should approve.
He
You're right. We
won't
should
file
probably
it
approve
unless
both.
we approve it.
Okay.
So it's not just we have to accept it, we have to approve the filing of it.
Yes.
Okay,
Well,
so
that
I
approval
think the
is-
motion would be then, I move that the audit committee accept the auditor's report on the single audit and approve the submission of this to the required federal oversight agencies and to the public, because I believe it goes up on our website.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, let me tell you one thing that I would like to call your attention to. You look at page 63. It's a reference to the new accounting principle.
Mark?
Yes.
This is on the city's CAFR section, which has already been issued. So I would be happy to take your comment into consideration for next year, but I'm not sure that we need to cover it in the meeting.
Yeah.
All right.
I think we've approved it, right?
Yes.
I thank you. It's a very good presentation. Really.
Thank you, sir, and I would be remiss if I didn't also acknowledge George and Florum, who played a very strong role in this whole process and have helped us, guided us, and informed us, and
Thank you, George.
helped pave the way to relationships with individual agencies, which proved to be very, very helpful. Thank you, George.
And I want to say that both operations and OMB were very instrumental, and it was great working with both of you.
When I think of the amount of work that went into this set, these pieces of paper, which we got so late, and how many hours these people put in, I think we should sort of say something. Because people in the city of New York should be grateful for the kind of work that this product represents. I don't know who to specifically say it, but
thank you.
A lot of people work very, very hard.
Thank you for volunteering.
But I think it's important then that we go into executive session to discuss the audit programs of both
I make a
Grant
motion to go
Thornton.
into executive session.
For the purpose of discussing non-public financial information about the city of New York.
Okay, do we need,
Camera.
I guess we should take a vote, or All in favor?
Yes.
Okay.
Mikhail, cameras off, please.
So we should have a motion to adjourn the...
Yes, I second Bud's motion that we adjourn.
Hey, Michelle, don't we want to say something on the record of all the people who work so hard as we usually do?
I thought we had.
Okay, sorry. We're adjourned.
Could I give you my copy of the single audit?